Rodan, I'm coming to you live from the 215 and your comic book connoisseur, your sommelier of sci-fi and superheroes, here to welcome you to the cellar of the Blurred Bar. That is exactly what we do here. We talk about all things comic books and superhero-y, just because everybody else talks about anime, and I'd rather, diversify. I'm bringing in our friend here, friend of the pod, as they like to say, uh, Jaurice Smiley. Get it right. You ain't got to get all phonetical and do the acrobats. Is Maurice with a J. That's the easiest way to remember it. Jaurice, welcome to the cellar, my friend. You are the author of both the Torian, I'm saying that correct, right?
Just Torian.
Torian, and the Royal Grey Box, which is a
Yes.
collection of short stories. And we'll talk about it because that's exactly what we like to do here. And yeah, man, feel free to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Big Dan. I appreciate you and your squad for giving me this platform, this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Oh, no
It
doubt.
is appreciated. So I guess to introduce me, I was born in Detroit, lived there for very few years, and eventually came to PG County, Maryland. Shout out to
Okay.
PG County. Um, like that's pretty much like the outs, like 25, 10 minutes from DC.
Okay.
Um, I grew up there, and then after I finished high school in '07, I went to North Carolina A&T, Aggie Pride for those who went to A&T or any HBCU. Shout outs to the HBCUs out there. And then after that, I was living in North Carolina. A&T is located in Greensboro, so shout outs to the city of Greensboro. Um, and I was living down there. Uh, Stayed down there longer than I should. Eventually, I left, and then I left in 2016. Came back to PG for a year, and then I was accepted to go to Miami University. And I was happy because it was like, oh, Miami, I'd be in Florida with beaches and this nice stuff. Then I checked, it said Ohio, and I got sad because it was Ohio. But then I got happy because then I realized Ohio is next to Michigan, and so made a
Gotcha.
couple of phone calls, and um, I ended up staying in Michigan while I was in school. Which I mean, Ohio is actually a pretty cool place where I was at. Shout outs to Miami University out
Hmm.
in Oxford, Ohio. It's like maybe 40 minutes out from Cincinnati.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. Um, Finished there in 2019. I got my master's in creative writing, and after 2019, that was summer 2019, and then I had to deal with a lot of stuff, and then COVID hit, which kind of for me, COVID was kind of a low key, like a blessing. I mean, it's an
Hmm.
unfortunate situation. People passed away, and my condolences. But the situation I was in was pretty much a situation in which I couldn't really leave the house anyway, and I got injured at a job, and just all type of a mess. But around that time, no, maybe a few weeks before March, when it became official, uh, I saw one of my friends. Shout outs to Theodore, aka Teddy. He had published a book with a company called Black Gold Publishing out in Newport News, Virginia Beach. It's all just Virginia Beach to me, like Newport News, Hampton Roads, Norfolk. It's all just Virginia Beach to me. But anyway, they were based out in that area, and so I reached out to them with Torian, and so they adored it, and so I started working with them, and then a few weeks later, COVID became a reality. So I was stuck indoors, and I had to work on a book. So I spent a large portion of summer 2020 just working on Torian, making it better. Torian was actually written back in 2011, and when I was still in like undergrad, like college, and I held on to it for years, and I was improving it.
Hmm.
Then Black Gold came along, and they really helped me tighten it up and just expand upon ideas and things of that nature. So I'm appreciative of them. Excuse me. Shout out to Tahara and the whole Black Gold publishing family out in the Virginia Beach area. Um, but I mean, there's more in my story. It's definitely had a lot of highs and lows and adventures and amazing, awful moments.
Of course.
Um, Torian was just. something that I had written back in 2011 because I was inspired by a lot of things, and that's what came about during that time.
Gotcha. Well, what an intro, and I appreciate that because it gives us the insight on who you are, and the we'll add to the story as this interview goes on. But once
Yeah,
again, welcome to the cellar, my friend. What we normally like to do here at the Blur Bar is we serve up some content, cocktails, and culture. And right now, it's just going to be a lot of content and culture because I can't have any cocktails. But while we are in our off season, a lot of times what we like to do is reach out to other creators who are doing their thing. You're one of them. You reached out to us, and we appreciate it. And then being able to take it all in, both with the Royal Grey Box and Torian, I think you're definitely headed in that right direction of being a name that not just uh, black folks know, but blurs specifically will keep an eye on and pay attention to. So, continue to do what you're doing. It's
thank you.
amazing work. Um, and before we jump into reviewing the actual books, um, let me know one if you can hear me or not. I did turn myself down just a little bit because I was hearing the echo
I can hear
on
you.
your side. Okay, cool. So, yeah, man. How long have you been writing? Like, what makes writing important to you?
Well, I was writing a bit in middle school, but it was mostly just for just assignments. Writing kind of sort of became important to me in 2008, and I graduated high school in '07, but I often tend to tell people I'm class of '08
Mm,
because many important things happened in 2008 that kind of shaped who I am in this journey and how I even got here. 2008, honestly, is probably one of the most important years we think about nerd and blurredom in general. In
mm-hmm.
2008, you got to think Iron Man, the first MCU movie, and look how big MCU is today.
Yeah,
2008, The Dark Knight came out, and The Dark Knight is actually the main reason, the biggest thing that happened to me that as a creative that really pushed me and motivated me and inspired me. Rest easy, Heath Ledger, of course.
yeah,
Um, that when that movie came out, I watched it. I was blown away, and of course, the reaction to the movie that people gave. I mean, the world kind of bowed to the movie because it was so excellent. We had never seen anything like that before.
mm-hmm.
I tell everybody I'm chasing a feeling. The same feeling that Dark Knight gave me, I want to give in my stories like that. That
Mm,
wow, that impactful thing. You're going to remember 5, 10 movies over 15 years old now. Um, but still, it has a major impact. I mean, the MCU is great, amazing. But even most movies that have come out in the MCU
they ain't got the
15
same
years
magic.
later still don't hold up in comparison to what Christopher Nolan did. So that was thing. Another thing that happened in 2008 was Smash Brothers, which I'm wearing this for a reason because in 2008 this game came out, Brawl, the third game. We're up to the fifth game now, and it's wild because you
Mhm.
got freaking Mario beating up on Sora and YouTube beating up on Cloud. But in 2008, this game came out, and this sort of connects to a Royal Grey box. Around that time, I became aware of competitive gaming. In particular, like fighting games like Street Fighter,
Mhm.
Tekken, Smash Brothers, Mortal Kombat, stuff like that. And so when this game came out, I told myself I wanted to compete in. I want to be really good, and it started off with like me not really being the best amongst my circle of friends. And after a while, I was better than them. And then I said, you know what, maybe I should try playing at a much higher level, see how far I can go. And then it took some time, but after a while I was living in North Carolina, I became one of the best players in the state of North Carolina for this game. Like I was traveling across North Carolina, like Charlotte, Raleigh,
Oh, you was putting in
um,
that work, huh?
yeah, I mean, even beyond, like, I would come back up to Maryland sometime to go to tournaments. I go to Florida, New Jersey. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of great people. But that competitive edge also really motivated me and inspired me. Because when you're playing at that level, like every decision you make is something just
It's important.
like important, and it can be a difference between winning and losing. Um, And this game came out in 2008, so that's another thing. I mean, Childish Gambino, he started dropping music in 2008, and he's one of the most notable blurs we can think of.
Facts.
Uh, so I mean, yeah, but The Dark Knight is what really like kind of inspired me and made writing important. I'm watching the movie and I got so inspired. I went home and I wrote a whole story, not in
Mm.
one take, but just started writing because I was just like, this is something that you know was just in my head and stuck.
That's crazy because I don't know if you watch any of our content. I often say that Dark Knight is one of my most favorite movies, my most watched at least. The upwards of probably, if I remember correctly, before I lost like my iTunes counter, I think set around like 200 times. That is like the movie for me.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that launchpad me into being more of a blurred. Um, I'm not an author, I'm not a writer, but I do read a lot. And so around 2006, 2007 is when I really got back into comic books. Before that, it was just novel after novel. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. 2008 was a pivotal year for a lot of blurs. As far as, whoever's beating you in Brawl, there's probably some people in Philly that we can reach out to, but I ain't going to do that to you. I don't want to
I
put no
mean,
smoke on your heels, but
I mean, nowadays, I mean, people play Ultimate. I mean, I
right.
still know how to play this. I'm still really good. I mean, I can play Ultimate. I just don't like it as much as this game. Like, I would play Ultimate every now and then, and I'll like
Mhm.
maybe get like third or fourth at a tournament, maybe even a second if I really tried hard enough. I just didn't enjoy it as much. But I'm still
Mhm.
like a supporter of the scene, and I still like encourage people to like if they are into competitive gaming, use every resource they can, like grow and evolve their skill level and things of that nature. I'm also Street Fighter style, so I've been heavy into that.
Okay.
Um, like,
I've never really been good at them, so
yeah,
trust me.
I uh, I went to BlurCon back in July. And I got third in Smash and third in Street Fighter.
Mm.
So I was putting in work. It's just Smash. I didn't play as much, and like Street Fighter, I played Manon as a kind of like a low tier character, which means they're not good.
Mm. Nah, as far as competitive stuff, man, I hats off to whoever can pull it off. It's not me. I play for the vibes, and all my friends know it. So, if you want to feel better about yourself, play me, and you'll walk away with a W. But um, yeah, man, let's jump into it. Now, you have two books that have been published out, right? The Royal Grey Box, which is your most recent release, correct?
Yes, yes.
And Torian, which, as you've already said, you've kind of built on it from 2011 to where we are today. Um, let's talk about Torian,
All
and
right.
let's let's really talk about the real world implications, or I don't know if it's metaphor, because a lot of it is definitely just like it's not as nuanced as much as it's in your face, and I think I can appreciate that to some degree. One, being a person of color, and two, the dynamic is often not breached the same way you breached it in this book when dealing with superheroes, like in comic book environments, right? A lot of the capes, they talk about it, but it's very much like, that's bad, don't do it, we're better, and move on. Um, in Torian, you address it a little bit more head on, a little bit more face to face with it, and for that, I appreciate that. I think while I had personally some issues with the tone sometimes in the way it was written, I don't think it was nothing to the point of like, oh, I can't read this. I continued to push through and really find the beauty in the fact that each character kind of felt important. Like you knew who the main character was and everything she's facing, but your B and C characters still feel human and important enough to be like, oh, well, this part of the book still, I don't have to read fast. I don't have to jump over this because these characters matter. And so I think to that degree, what pushed you to, or what motivated you to really tackle race in the book?
Well, the original inspiration behind Torian came from Metroid, the Nintendo game with
Yep.
Samus and all that. Torian is actually the name of the last area you go to fight the final boss, Mother Brain. And so I was so inspired by that that I wanted to kind of come up with something similar. I didn't want to take Samus and make her black. I wanted to put my
Hmm.
own twist on the character. And so from there, Torian was born. Um, so it started off with that. And then as I expanded upon ideas, there were other things that kind of led to like tackling race beyond just her being character being a black woman. It was the story set in California because there was a situation that happened to a white male. His name was Kelly Thomas, schizophrenic homeless man in the city that story set in Fullerton, California. He was a victim of police brutality, and it was so bad that he was put on life support. And his family eventually decided to take him off life support, and he unfortunately passed away a few days later. So that was an inspiration. Um, what else was an inspiration? The Naruto versus Pain arc was a really big inspiration as
I
well.
saw that. I noticed that. I
Yeah,
picked up the vibes reading it.
yeah. And this anime called Gungrave. Well, it was originally a video game first, but it became an anime. The same guy who made Trigun is called Gungrave, which is essentially it's an older anime, maybe about 20 years old. It's about these two guys who are both like involved in organized crime, and one guy wants to ascend to the top, but while he's there, his friend is kind of iffy about it, and the guy ends up killing his friend. But the
Mm.
friend, they're in a world in which they have technology that can bring people back to life, and so he gets brought back to life. And then this is like 15 years later, and he decides to get revenge on his friend, and then it gets more complicated than that. And Gungrave was a big influence, and I would say what else? The school to prison pipeline, which that's where I guess the race becomes injected. I really wanted to like talk about that because
Hmm.
there's this book by this woman named Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow,
Hmm.
which I read a few years ago. Um, After I had written it back in 2011, um, between that 10-year period, I read a book, that book, and it was so amazing, and it really touched on like how our prison system in this country is designed to just ensnare people for profit, and in particular, the school prison pipeline pretty much is designed for minority students to go to jail, whether it be giving them longer suspensions or whether it be hiring actual prison guards to watch over schools. It's just stuff like that that I found compelling, and I wanted to kind of look at and discuss in my story. Um, I knew that making her black, I knew I had to like do something special with it. So there's this book that I read called "The Sisters Are All Right," which was really great and gave me some
Really good.
insight. Yeah, it gave me some insight. Um, but yeah, when it came to like making my character, I didn't just want to take Samus and make her black. I wanted to like put my own twist on character pretty much and see where that would take me. And I think it turned out pretty well.
I agree. I think um, while you immediately recognize the Metroid uh, Samus comparison, I think if you take that at face value, that could be the buy-in for picking up your book, but it is not the totality of what this book is. And so I appreciated that. I think everyone walks in with preconceived notions of like, oh, this is going to be pretty much a Samus clone with a little bit more depth, and especially if you make the character black, then you have for whatever reason we feel like there's this compulsion to write about race, but I feel like you injecting race relations and even some of the negativity of it felt purposeful in the book versus just like necessary, right? um, One thing that I often think of is when they made Sam Wilson Captain America, right? You're like, oh, he has to deal with race now because he's in the forefront, he's in the limelight, versus It just being the reality of the character alongside of the fact that they still have this legendary epic mission that they have to complete and get through. And so I think for that, I would say job well done, man. You know, this is
Yeah.
a very good book.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, um, I just wanted to, create something because I was inspired by Metroid. And also, I just felt like there weren't too many prominent black lady superheroes, so why not make one?
Agreed, agreed. Now the Royal Grey Box. Uh, Normally, I'm not a person that picks up a collection of short stories. It's just not a thing that I do anymore. Largely due to the fact that I think it brings me back to the trauma of like high school and having to write all my writing assignments being, oh, write this short story and all these other things. After a while, I just was like, I don't want to read any more short stories. But I read that and I'm glad I did. I think most, I don't know how many people have told you this, but I'm pretty sure the tournament is a very loved story in that book.
Yeah, I mean, I bad for nothing. People often say that. Then the story afterwards, the story with the night chapter one, people love that one and the tournament one.
Yeah.
The tournament one is just inspired by this guy I know. His name is Demo. Well, his tag is that Demo guy. Shout outs to Demo. He's out in North Carolina. I went to a tournament with him in Daytona Beach called CEO, which stands for Community Effort Orlando, which it's hosted in Daytona, but originally it was hosted in Orlando. But then
Mhm.
for a few years they were switching back and forth between Orlando and Daytona. I actually went to both. I went to Orlando in 2016, and then 2018 I went to the Daytona Beach one. And so he was at the Daytona Beach one as well. And I've seen Demo a few times back in the day, high school tournaments, but I hadn't seen him in a while. And so while we were there, um, he had meant I knew he had a daughter, but he didn't bring his daughter with her. And he had said that he wished he had brought her with him so she can come to the tournament. I think he had driven from like North Carolina all the way to Daytona Beach, which dear goodness, that's really far.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of lingered in my head. And in that story, I mentioned Popeyes because CEO is an event where they have it set up to where if you have a badge and 10 CEO, you get 5% off on Popeyes. Because there was like a
Okay.
Popeyes like right down the street. And so they managed to, be the plug with that. And I was like, oh, okay, we're about to abuse that. So that's all I was eating the whole weekend. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, like 5% off. And there were other restaurants, but Popeye was just like right there. So, and plus it's
Right.
Popeyes, you can never go wrong with Popeye's chicken. So we kind of abused that for like 80% of the weekend. Good times. But yeah, I mean, that story kind of just came from I get my experiences and his experiences because he actually plays Killer Instinct and he plays Thunder and he was like one of the best players in North Carolina. I mean, every game he played, he was one of the best. Like he's really good at Street Fighter, really good at Mortal Kombat, really good at Tekken, really good at Killer Instinct. So, but I just thought about that and I wanted to write about that because I mean, the tournament scene and the general vibe and culture is a great thing.
Mhm.
It's not like most other esports you can think of, like League or Dota or like shooters. It's something that, and this is something that I show in the story, it is open format, meaning basically it don't matter how long you've been playing, 5 months, 5 years, 5 minutes. Anybody can come and show up. Like literally, there was a guy who won a Guilty Gear tournament at Evo, the biggest fighting tournament in the world, and he had just been playing online. And he didn't start playing Guilty Gear back in the 90s or 2000s. He had started with the latest one, and he won
Mhm.
Evo. And that's a beautiful thing. Anybody can just show up. It don't matter how old, how young, skin color,
Mhm.
trans, LGBT, none of that matters. It's just you show up, you got a controller, I got next. And then you see how far you can go.
Okay.
Even in my case, I'll never forget the day in which um, I beat somebody who was like I beat the best player in the state in Brawl. And the crazy thing is he was like, because but the way it works is for Smash, we have like a power ranking where there are a couple of tournaments, and then after a while, they take the tournament data and they use that data to come up with a top 10 player list. And every state or area has this. And
Mm-hmm.
so for North Carolina, I've been playing for years, but I never been on it. But then, like during one season, I had beaten somebody who was like number seven, like seventh in the state. And then a
Mm-hmm.
few tournaments later, during that same season, I beat the number one player, and I wasn't even ranked. So it wasn't like I was number 10 fighting to get up on the list. No, I was not even thought of. And then I beat him, and then it was like a major celebration. And I made the list. I made the list like twice
Mm-hmm.
during my heyday and in my prime. Like I think the highest I ever got was like number 5, like in the state of North Carolina. Like I mean, it was post college, and so I mean, it wasn't like I was in school. I mean, I had a job. It was kind of just some like just to get by. So I had a lot of free time to just sit there and practice and travel. Um, so that just tournament vibe, I really wanted to capture that with that story.
And that's great, man. I think uh, for someone who has 2 daughters, uh, while I'm not in the competitive tournament type vibe, I do want to. I never want them to walk away with the feeling that they're not important or as important as what my hobby is. Even now, like reading comic books and doing the podcasting thing, um, and just all around being a blurred, I want to make sure that my girls feel like this is something they can get into if they want to.
Yeah,
So, I think you wrote the characters out um, as realistic as they could be for the compactness of the story. So I
yeah.
you know.
It's just again the FG. Shout outs to the FGC. No matter where you are, North Carolina, Virginia, Japan,
Mhm.
Canada. If you play fighting games and you're serious about it, shout outs to you. It definitely. I met a lot of great people that had an impact on me as a person, as a creative, playing at that level. I don't do it as much because there's other things I want to focus on,
Mhm.
but I'll maybe pop up at the occasional tournament and cause a stir in bracket, I guess. But again, shout outs to the FGC. That's where that story came from.
Now, one, you are published and you have 2 books that have been printed and published as well. So I assume that you're now hitting up the con and doing the con circuit to spread the word, correct?
Yeah, I've been going to cons since like 2011.
Okay.
The first con I went to was Animazer in 2011. Back like maybe that was Memorial Day weekend 2011, and then I've been going to a few. The guy who drew the Torian cover I met at a con, NC Comic Con on Durham. His name is William, but on his IG is Wally V. For those who really like the Torian Roy Ray Boss cover, his name is Wally V. Really great dude, great artist. Me and him got some more stuff we're cooking up, but that's in the future. Um, so I hadn't been to a con since like 2014, but then after I
Mhm.
published my book in 2021, um, I came back to Maryland like in early 2022, and so I had 2 friends of mine in college
Mhm.
I mean, we went to college together that actually managed to come to like BlurCon out in like Arlington, which I live in PG. It's like literally 25 minutes tops from where I am. So they
Okay.
told me they were going, and I was like, oh wow, okay. And so I went, and I had a really great time. This was like July last year. Um, I had a really great time. Hung out with my friends. Promoted my book because only touring was out back then. And I
Mhm.
actually met Orlando Jones and took a picture with him because he was like the main guest they had last year.
Mhm.
So that was really cool. He talked about my book, and after that experience, I told myself I want to do these more consistently. I mean, because the con life is cool, but now that I'm establishing a career, there's a way for me to go there and have fun and be able to promote who I am and what I do. And so this year, I did MagFest in January this year,
Okay.
Katsucon which is really cool. Those two are actually in the same building. They're just a month apart. Katsucon's in February, MagFest is in January.
Mm,
And then in March, I did an event in Richmond called GalaxyCon,
okay.
and yeah, I actually met the two stars from Daredevil, Kingpin and Fisk. Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Daredevil,
Charlie Cox.
um, Charlie Cox. Yeah, I met both of them, took a picture of them. They were both holding my book. Um, and then in July, this past July, I did BlurCon again, and Cree Summers was the guest. I met her, took a picture with her holding my book. So I did 4 cons this year, 3 actually in a row from like January all the way up until March. So I've
You've
definitely been
been
hitting
busy.
the circuit. Yeah, I've been hitting the circuit because I realized that, people who are into my books, they tend to go to stuff like that. I know this because I go to stuff like that. And I mean, that's how you meet, that's how you connect with the public, that's how you establish yourself. Um, I'm working on something big for BlurCon next year. If things
Okay.
go right, hopefully I'll we can I can make a splash in a major way. I actually went there with like 12 books this year. I sold out in like 3 hours touring. So I did really great and I got the word out. And one of my homeboys had a panel and he promoted my book on his panel and allowed me to speak for a couple of seconds, which is really cool. I'm trying to get a panel this year, but the panel process is just a lot of waitlisting and just hoping you make it. But what about you? Did you go to BlurCon this year?
So I haven't been to any cons in a while, just because I got a young family. So
Hmm.
we did this year. Uh, there was something called Philly Otaku Fest in April, so we did that, and they kind of had us there as like just doing the media and all that stuff. But the goal is to continue to grow this part of our brand and the podcasting brand, while also both me and the other founder of this podcast also do photography. So we're trying to branch out and do that as well. And not trying to do, we do photography. So it is trying to find that balance at the same time following the passions. We should be doing more cons next year, but that all depends on where everything lands on schedules. Um, but like I said, I doing my research of you and like going through your Instagram and all these things. I was like, oh, I think I've seen you at some cons. I've seen you at cons that my friends have gone to. I'm not big on people sometimes, and so cons to
Yeah.
me can sometimes feel like maybe. So um that being said, I would. This sounds like a silly question, but you're one of the people who go to cons and put deodorant on, right?
Of course.
Oh, of course.
I
Okay.
mean,
All right.
yeah, of course. I can't be out there. It's something I learned. I mentioned this in the book. I got this actually from one of my people I know that can one of my like fellow competitors. I
Mm,
said this in Royal Gray Box. Good, feel good, play good. So it's kind of the same thing. Car look
bet.
good is makes you smell good. And I get it. I mean, the con life is overwhelming.
It's busy,
Um,
you know.
it's busy. You're
It's
always
busy.
on your feet. There's always something happening, whether it be 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. Parties are happening, whether it be 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. Competitions,
You just gotta keep it in your back pocket. That's all.
panels. It's just so much going on. But at the same time, the networking, the people you meet, the costumes you see, the contests. Like I legit, when I entered that Smash Ultimate tournament this year at BlurCon, I was like under it. I was drunk, inebriated, tipsy Smash because I don't like Smash Ultimate as much, but I just figured I'm here. It's only like $5, and I got third on a whim. And I was just doing like I play Snake in both Brawl and Ultimate, so I was just doing like basic Snakes like people were falling for. And I'm like, this still works. So I was like, screw it up. See how far it takes me. I got third doing it. So I
Mm,
mean, it's just stuff like that that you don't get to experience every day. On top of just
that's real.
networking and meeting people and just the opportunities that can come from that. It's always best to take a moment to breathe and chill though while when you're living the con life. But it's just such a great thing. to experience, especially something like BlurCon, because all these cons, they're great, but BlurCon really is built and tailored up for Black people and Black culture, which you can never go wrong with that, you know?
It's always a good time. Now, you did say that you're working on some future projects, and if you feel like sharing a little bit about it, feel free to do it here. Uh, you know, I think one thing that I would like to plug is for anybody that is looking for a book that does equal amounts of action and adventure and also dealing with the sometimes real life realities that we face as Black folks. I would strongly suggest Torian, and I believe it's last I checked, it was on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on. You can get it on Amazon. However, you really want to support me and support the movement. My publisher is also above my publisher's website. My publisher is blackgoldpublishing.com. That's all
Okay.
one word. Black Gold Publishing. You can get it off there. You can get it off Amazon as well. But if you really want to support me and support the movement, Black Gold Publishing is why I really recommend that you purchase it.
And that's what
Um,
I'll make sure I put in the description for you, because
yes.
we want to make sure we show that support. Uh,
Yeah.
can you tell us anything about the the future projects without giving away too much? I know that sometimes when you're working on stuff, you don't want to jinx it. So,
All right. Well, since I was born in Detroit, I have another superhero story lined up. And the characters from Detroit set in the same universe as Torian, so they're going to meet Torian eventually. Um, it's also a story in which the main character can break the fourth wall. Without revealing too much about his powers, I'll just say this: He's imagine if Goku was a firebender, and his best friend imagine if Goku was a waterbender, and then another friend of theirs is essentially Hidan from Naruto, but he don't need no blood in a circle.
okay.
But it's all set like in Detroit and dealing with like a city in which is notorious for its crime and its like decaying and people abandoning it and like abandoned buildings and still having a culture and Motown and home to one of the greatest rappers of all time and that the movement that came um, independently of him and things of that nature. So I said it there, and then I'm actually working on another short story collection, another Royal Grey box um, that should be out down the timeline. And actually, there's a sequel to Torian that's already been written,
Okay.
and but I need to like tell those other stories, those other characters first. Like I have a guy in Detroit that I'm working on. I have a lady in Atlanta who I'm working on that will meet Torian. I even have a character in Virginia Beach who I'm not gonna publish them, but I'm gonna like have them be mentioned and like maybe be featured in other stories that, and he'll eventually meet Torian and things of that nature. But the sequel to Torian, what I can say without revealing too much, is when I was writing the sequel to Torian, I was heavy in the dead space, like
Mm,
particularly 1 and 2. We're just gonna ignore Dead Space 3. That didn't happen. It was bad.
didn't happen.
Um, yeah, but Dead Space 1 and 2. Which side note, I didn't put. I need to play the remake. I heard it was like really good. But Dead Space 1 and 2, I was playing those games heavy because around like 2016, even 2018, the games became games with gold on Xbox. This pretty much means you have Xbox
Mhm.
Live, you get free games. So Dead Space was free. I was like, oh, for sure, let's check it out. And so I played it and I fell in love. And then a few years later, Dead Space 2 was a games with gold, and I played that, fell in love. So Dead Space is going to be something that is going to be a heavy influence. On top of, there are other things I want to explore with Torian, which I feel like is going to be something really interesting to explore. The
Mhm.
idea being basically because the main character name is Whitney, which the face of Torian is actually this girl I know who I went to college with, uh, who she let me use her face. So shout outs to her, Whitney, and she got her name from Whitney Houston. And so when I think about Whitney Houston, one thing about Whitney Houston in the beginning of her career, she was actually despised by Black people a bit. Reason being is because they felt like she was a sanitized pop star for like mainstream audiences. Case in
Mhm.
point, she was booed at some award show back in the day, maybe like the Soul Train Award or something like that. She was booed when she was like uh, when they announced her name to win an award. And so I
Mm,
thought to myself, that would be kind of interesting to explore, like how would black people and black culture react to somebody like Whitney existing in the real world.
mm,
If, especially her being United States. I mean, Wakanda's a little bit different. I mean, Wakanda's its own country, but Whitney is from America, and you know, I thought that would be interesting dynamic to explore. Like, how would she be perceived in black circles?
well,
Like,
all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
yeah, like the idea basically, like if she because she didn't go to HBCU, because in the sequel she's in college, she didn't go
Mm,
to HBCU. How they feel about if she dated white boys and just stuff like that. I thought would be interesting to explore while being a superhero and while dealing with new threats and stuff from your past and other things on top of like the Dead Space stuff, which I don't want to talk too much because it would spoil.
right.
You played Dead Space, right?
The first one, I'm not big on horror video games, and
Ah,
that first one scared me enough to not play the
yeah.
second. So,
Well, what I can say without spoiling too much, in Dead Space 1, you're looking for someone.
right.
And then you find out something. And then Dead Space 2, that person is looking for you.
Yeah.
That person's coming after you and not in a friendly, like
Yeah.
hospitable manner. They're trying to take your life. So that is something I wanted to toy around with in um, the Secret of Torian. And
No, you're good. So, one question I did have for you: uh,
yes.
what is your, if at all, what challenges do you see yourself facing with the world building that you're doing?
Um, I guess it's when it comes to world building, I having the free time on top of just juggling life,
That's real.
there's just so much that goes on and so many things, good and bad, that you just have to deal with um, while you're out here just living life. And um, rent is always due, bills are always due, um,
Facts.
family time, friend time, having sitting on a backlog of games, sitting on a backlog of stuff on your streaming queue. It's never enough
Mm,
moments in the day to do everything all at once. Um,
big
Life is
fact.
demanding. Life is demanding. But when it does come to world building, what I can say is I do have various notes. I have like a ton of notes. Like even
Mm,
now, I look at my tabs. I have like nine, like maybe 15 tabs open. I feel like you're not real creative if you don't have like at least 15, possibly maybe 30 tabs open on your
of course,
Firefox, Chrome, whatever browser you use, as long as it's not Explorer.
it is a lot of tabs.
Yeah.
um, well, yeah, man. I think I'm looking forward to everything that you're going to be doing. Keep us in the loop.
Yeah, of
We'll
course.
make sure. Where can people find you at if they want to just hit you up and talk? Talk smack about these fighting games that you're good at, or even talk more about Torium with you.
Well, if you want to reach out to me, there's IG 313 Snake is the name. Twitter, I'm not calling it X, I'm calling it Twitter because no,
That's right.
sorry, Elon, can't do it. It's Twitter to me. 313 Trill. What else? Facebook, Jaurice, last name Smiley. That's about it, really.
Okay,
Those three are what I'm most active on. I have TikTok, but I don't use it as much. I
I get
put
that.
I put content up there. But yeah, I mean, those are main three that you'll catch me on, and you can send me a message. I'll hit you back. If you want to find me out and about, the cons are a good bet. I mean, MagFest is next month. The goal is to be there.
Okay,
MagFest is in National Harbor, just outside of Northern Virginia, DC. BlurCon is in Arlington, in Northern Virginia, which is like 15, 20 minutes from DC. Um, I have
let's see
to,
if I can try to make one of those this year. Next
yeah,
year.
yeah. I'm looking at other cons. There's something I was told about called ChromaCon in Baltimore. It was founded by a black woman.
Okay.
Which is really cool because my older brother, which side note, the guy on the cover of the Royal Grey box is my older brother.
Okay.
He lives in Baltimore, so and I have a friend down in Baltimore too, so I might be able to stay one of them and go to a ChromaCon.
Okay.
So you might catch me at ChromaCon. I mean, yeah, if you really want to catch me on about, just try to hit up some of those cons I mentioned: MagFest, ChromaCon, BlurredCon, IG. I mean, if you want to play games on Xbox, Black Man is 313.
Black
But yeah,
Man
I
is
mean,
313.
yeah, I play on Xbox primarily, and most stuff is cross-play nowadays anyway. So
Yeah.
we should be able to play most games. But yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
those are the main ones.
All right, so I got one final question for you before we wrap this up.
Yes.
Uh, if you could write any story for any fictional character, who would it be?
Oh wow. Any fictional character, right? Any story for them?
Yep.
Um. Oh wow, that's a really good one. I would say I want to write a story for. I'm trying to think what's a character. Maybe. Hmm. I would say. That's a good one. Give me. I think of just a character I
Hey,
really
no
really
pressure,
like.
man.
Um. Maybe. Dang. How about Terry Bogart?
Okay.
Terry Bogart, he's one of my favorite like fighting game characters. I even mentioned this. The story is set in Detroit. Metroid was an influence on that. I can say Fatal Fury was an influence on the story set in Detroit in terms of just like the general vibe of Fatal Fury and like the heroes and the villains. Fatal Fury was a big influence on that without revealing too much.
Mm-hmm.
So if those of you who are familiar with the Fatal Fury lore, like Geese Howard and Rock Howard and Joe Higashi and all that, yeah,
Big
it's a
callback.
thing. Yeah, it's going to be a thing in the story set in Detroit. But I'll pick Terry Bogard because he's kind of just he's literally like how can I say this? He is what Americans think of just no, he's what Japanese people think of Americans
Big
essentially.
facts.
A lot of those characters we think about from these fighting games when they were made, like in the '90s, they were literally what Japanese people think Americans are. Gao being overly patriotic, Rufus in
Mhm.
Street Fighter 4 being fat and obnoxious. Um, let's see what else. Balrog, Mike Tyson, um, Dudley. He was based on some British boxer, but Dawson, what they think of Indians, like yeah, Capcom, you be kind of racist, but anyway. I mean, I love Capcom, I really do. I mean, you
Right.
can't. I mean, I have complaints about Capcom, but we can't knock Capcom for Street Fighter and Resident Evil and things of that nature. So, but yeah, I'll pick Terry Bogard because I really like the character, and I feel like he's a person who he like the general vibe he gives off is just somebody that's like cool with everybody. Like the
Mhm.
fact that he is kind of a mentor to Rock Howard, who is the son of Geese Howard, and Geese is like his mortal enemy because he killed his dad. And I like that type of dynamic. And I feel like there's more to explore about him that could be said about society and or American culture in general, in terms of just like how Japanese view us and like what he means and things of that nature, which
Mhm.
I kind of do in the story set in Detroit, but I would just take the character um already. I wouldn't like try to like do what I do with the stories in Detroit, which is like make same thing I did for Touring, whereas I don't make black Terry Bogard. I just take the character and put my own twist on it. So, in this case, I would just take Terry and see what makes him tick and what can be explored and what can be commented on about him as a person, what he means, like and things of that nature.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. If he gets to write anybody, it'll be Terry Bogard, and I think that'd be an interesting story to see. Not for nothing, see a black man write about it. what Japan thinks of a white man. I think that would be hilarious. And uh, if it ever happens, let us know because I would love to read that. Um, but thanks again for stopping by the Cellar. We appreciate you, man. Continue to do what you do because if, as we always like to say here, we appreciate anyone who writes or creates their own story. A lot of people complain about how the media and Hollywood are telling our stories, and the only reply I have to that is to write your own story, and you're out here doing that. So, for anyone that is complaining about stories that are written about us but not by us, uh, hit up Jaurice Smiley, pick up Torian. I have my copy. You can't have this one. This is mine. And also the Royal Grey Box. And look for his other projects. Make sure you follow him. If you follow,
Yeah.
it's only fair. So we appreciate you, man. Anything you want to say to anybody before we dip?
Well, I mean, shout outs to North Carolina A&T, Aggie Pride. Shout outs to Marion University in Oxford. Shout outs to the Blair community. Shout outs to the FGC, particularly in the North Carolina area. Shout outs to North Carolina Smashing, particularly all the old school ball players. I know. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much a shout outs to you guys too for what you guys do. The Blur Bar, Cellar,
Appreciate it.
Big Dan, your whole family, staff, crew. It's
Appreciate it.
appreciated. It really is.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, man, we'll be in touch. Looking forward to the next time we talk, man.
All right.
Have
Thank
a
you.
good one.
You too.
Y'all have a blessed night.